Hey, it's Rob. Welcome to Axel's Garage. We're back working at the slicer here, and just as I thought we were on the home stretch with assembly, I have been emailing one of our viewers back and forth because he's got a similar slicer, you know, what we appear to believe it's a Model 75, and his name's Alan. I think it's Alan. But we've been emailing back and forth, and he's got a family heirloom slicer also, a couple years newer, but very similar. And together we've been picking each other's brains about what we were able to find and stuff. And it turns out, after I put the slider rods in, you know, and everything is sliding nice, and I didn't really damage the paint or anything, got them in looking nice, that, which I thought was normal. You know, when it bottoms out and it's actually, this carriage here is sliding on the rod and it hits the inside of the chassis of the unit, metal to metal. But it turns out there's bumpers that go on this carriage slider, and they actually serve two purposes. They're a bumper so that you don't have this metal to metal banging, and they also align the oil hole. So, you know, I kind of like stuck this this long Q-tip in to see where the oil hole is, so I could slide this to figure out whether I'm in the oil hole or not, trying to feel for when it takes the hole. And I'm actually in my hole. I'm in the oil hole for a decent amount, so it does align it, but it's not real critical, because as long as, you know, when you're back all the way, you're in the oil hole. So if the original bumpers were on the sides of the carriage, they disintegrate, you can't get them. They sell a retrofit bumper that actually goes on the shaft itself. So what I'm thinking is, instead of buying the retrofit bumper, I'm going to use O-rings, because I just need to, it's lining up. So my oil hole is lining up when I'm all the way back, and if I move it out just a hair, you know, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so, I'm still in the oil hole, because I could feel that as I slide this, you see how it moves? So I know I'm in the hole when I'm all the way back, and I can move it this much and I'm still in the hole. So if I put a little O-ring bumper on it, and what I mean by that is I just have an O-ring assortment, alright, and I'm just going to pick one that fits over the shaft just snugly. It could be a little loose over the shaft even. I don't need to stretch it over the shaft, because it's just going to sit there, and it might move a little bit, but it's going to stop that metal banging, which would annoy me a little bit. So, I mean, I didn't want to start taking it apart after I started putting it together, but here we are. The odd thing is, just before he sent me the email about the bumpers, questioning about the bumpers, which I didn't even know I had bumpers, he made me start thinking. Just before I got that email, we added some oil, and what I did was we used a little Super Lube synthetic on the bearings. Okay, and it's a food grade oil. It doesn't really, you could use regular 3-in-1. I said, you know what, let me give it a couple drops of that. We put 6 drops in each bearing, because we know they're probably going to be completely dry. The crankcase was completely dry, and we used the 3-in-1 that's made for this. I actually engineered for 1/4 horsepower motors or larger. This is the 3-in-1 motor oil. It's an SAE 20, and from all the research I could do, that's what goes in the crankcase. So we filled the crankcase, or, you know, it's mostly full. It's about, I would say, probably about 3/4. We could see the oil level, but now we're going to turn it, and I'm concerned that we got to turn it again. I didn't expect I was going to be turning this thing over again. So I'm going to put the screw that actually goes in the oil hole, that holds that arm, and we're going to screw this in, and hopefully we don't lose oil or make a mess when we turn this thing over. If we do, it's you know, it's going to be a clean oil leak, but hopefully we won't lose any when we turn it over. When we first put the oil in, you got the gearbox cover here, the chrome cover that's got 4 screws, and there is a gasket. When we first put the oil in, we did get oil leaking at the bottom of the gasket, and I gave each screw a little tighten, and the oil stopped leaking. I let it sit, and there's no oil residue, you know, leaking out of it. So we think we're good there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this thing up on its side and up with some blocks of wood and some towels to protect my paint job, and we're going to take those rods out just a little bit. I'm not going to take them all the way out. We're just going to take them out enough to slide an O-ring on there, and we'll have some cushioning. See how it goes. Alright, so with the slicer on its side, hopefully we're not dumping oil anywhere. Looks okay. You can see how this arm slides back and forth, and it's not going all the way against the metal rod. This one's not going to touch. It's just the upper one that's going to touch. So we can't see the upper one. There's actually no real way to get the camera in there for you to see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this screw out on this side, that screw out on that side, and I'm going to push it out this way so we can get the right size O-ring in there, hopefully. So my biggest concern here is I just don't want to damage my paint. You know, we did a lot of you know, putting these washers on. I'm sure gonna, you know, these washers actually sunk into the paint that we have on there, so we're going to try to get the washers back in the same exact position that we had them, so that they look decent. The back ones you're never going to see, but I'll know it's there, and I get a little wacky with that. So now I think this upper one here, I'm pushing with my other hand, yep, and I can push it out. So I got it out on a little bit, and now we'll be able to take some O-rings and try to get an idea of what O-ring is going to fit. That one fits on there a little snug. That was 214. We're going to go 215. That one's a little loose. Try this one. Loose. That is 215. 215 is a little loose. I don't know what these measurements are. 215, 214. This one's. Get a finger on this side. That one a little snug. But I think that one will work. So, I don't know if I'm always on camera here. Alright, so we got an O-ring that fits. It's snug, but it's not tight. It'll move if it has to move, but it's just a bumper. So this has got to go on the inside, on the opposite side of this here. So on this end, I could come in, and I'm going to try to fish it onto the shaft right before the shaft goes in, and that'll be our bumper for the far end. Now we'll take another one, and this one's got to go on this side, which is going to be completely blind for the most part. So if I move this shaft all the way down to here, and I push through, sort of see from the top end. Okay, so I got it on the edge of the shaft. Now pushing the shaft with my finger, I got to try to lift it up and get it in its spot, and there's the shaft, and I put it through on the other side. Clutch. Alright. Alright, so I got the shaft back in place. I got an O-ring on both sides. Doesn't look like I'm leaking engine oil anywhere, or the crankcase oil. I'm going to put got about 1/4 of an inch on this side, making sure the shafts are fairly even. And I'm going to put the screw in on the back side with the washer. Alright, so now on this end, I'm going to take my screw and the washer, thread it in. And what I want to do is I want to get that washer up and in the groove that I made in the paint when the washer tightened down. So just snug it a little bit, and I can come over over on this side and snug it a little bit. Alright, and then I'll come back over here and I'll snug it a little bit. Come back over here and snug it a little bit. Okay, and so far it doesn't look like I damaged anything that I did. Alright, so now, back on its edge, no oil leaks, thank God. We can take this, and you can see, now you got a cushion. Now when we put our stick in to find the oil hole, it's still there. So we're still in the oil hole. So we're lined up good. And now we got a nice bump on either end instead of that metal to metal contact. Nice. Alright. So along with our lubrication, I'll slide this over a little bit and I'll bring you in closer onto the motor. Alright, so this bolt and pivot piece that holds that swing arm, that's where you fill for your gearbox. Now your gearbox is right behind this plate. I didn't take the plate off. They do sell replacement gaskets, but I just gave it a little turn and I got nothing, no residual coming down anywhere, no leaks on the oil there. This little spot right here with a spring cap is for the front motor bearing, and there's a similar one on the back for the motor bearing, and they take, from what I've heard, 3 drops all the way up to a teaspoon of oil. Some guys have said even if you over oil them, all it's going to do is leak some oil out. So I put about 6 drops in. We'll see how it sounds. I might add a little bit more and see if some residual starts to leak out when the motor's running. Wipe it up and it'll create its own level. But 3 drops or so, 3 to 6 drops is pretty much where we're getting. I don't know how often. That's the one big thing, is how often they need to be re-oiled. We're not going to be using this a ton, so I would guess if we had to re-oil it, once a year or something, or just a couple of drops every now and then, I think we'll be okay. So our next lube point is going to be in here. Now, I know that we didn't use food safe lube on the rods, and the rods really aren't going to come in contact with food. Food is pretty much on this platform, on the cutting surface and stuff. So in here, there's a plate that goes over here. This main worm gear is not going to come in contact with food, and anything that might drip off of there is going to drip down onto the table, not going to come in contact with food. So what I'm going to be using is a high pressure, highly adhesive lubricant. This is what it is. I use it a lot of times on window mechanisms in the doors of cars, and it seems to work well there. So what I'm going to do is, I just want to see if I can lightly spray some in here. It doesn't, it's a highly adhesive lube, which is supposed to say that it clings to whatever you're putting it on. So I'm going to grab a wrench, and I'm going to see if I can turn this mechanism easy. Just so I can make sure I'm getting all of it. So after looking at it and thinking about it, I don't think I'm going to add any more lube than just this. This is. I was reading the sheet on this one. High pressure resistant, highly adhesive, synthetic oil. I think it's going to be good. But not only do we have the worm gear, we have this slider. This is a slider there. So I'm going to get a little. In this slider. The excess is going to drip down the opening in the case. I'm going to make sure that I got in there good with everything. I'm pretty happy with that. I'll work it up and down just a little bit more to Make sure I got good coverage everywhere. Okay, so that's not going to come in contact with food. What has the potential to come in contact with food is this shaft. So on the shaft, I'm going to use a food-safe lubricant. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this, and this is the Super Lube synthetic, and I'll link this in the description below. It's a food-safe lube. I'm going to put a decent amount on this shaft because it needs to work its way down into this sleeve that the shaft goes through. It does have an oil point above so that you can lubricate it, you know, when it's in use over time. But let that run down the shaft, and then I'm going to run this up in the opposite direction. Okay, and we got it all the way to the top. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take this and let it run down the shaft. And hopefully it works its way into this area here where that shaft goes into, and any residual is going to run down and out if I over lubed anything, and that will, you know, eventually dry up nice. And this is the lube I'm using, synthetic lightweight oil, food grade, and I'll link the oil that I used for the motor as well, the 3-in-1 motor oil. It's A4020 motor oil. There's a ton of different brands. You could use whichever you like. These were just readily available. And I think I'm all lubed up. I think this is going to be pretty good. We can put the cover plate on now. Alright, so the cover plate has got chamfered holes, so you only know it goes on one way. It's not, the screw holes aren't completely square. So I have these screws threaded in here because I was trying to figure out where all the screws go, so I was just threading in a couple turns in each spot, so I knew I had all the screws. This we took and we stripped the paint off of it. We wire brushed it on the bench brush. It's got some pitting to it, but the best it's going to come out with the pitting. It had a lot of rust on it. And I just snugged them up, wipe my fingerprints off of them, and that's it. So I think I know I've said this before, now we're on the assembly phase. So we got that done, we got the slider on there, the arm on there nice, and now we can start with our assembly, and we'll do that in the next video. Comments, suggestions, tell me what I'm doing wrong, or if you got one of these old slices. Like we said, we believe this to be a Model 75. This one's built in 1940. The guy that's emailing me back and forth, his is in 48. He's got a different style motor on it, but pretty much the rest of the slicer seems to be the same from the pictures that we've been exchanging back and forth. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and as always, thanks for watching.